Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is Shea Dixon. Shea, we're recording this on a Thursday because you got to fly out to Las Vegas, but we're here. It's game time pretty much. We're 3 days away from LSU and USC kicking off in Las Vegas, 6:30 Central Time. How are you feeling?
Well, with the beauty of editing, we could have just said that it's
I'm posting
Friday
it today.
morning.
I'm
It's Friday
posting it
morning.
today. We're gonna give people 3 full days to listen to us.
Let's do that. Okay, then we didn't lie. Matty B turns into Matthew. He doesn't lie to the people about when it was recorded. I am flying out in the morning on Friday. So, yes, this is Thursday. Well, we just debated that ahead of time if we were going to say anything about injuries because we won't hear about Chris Hilton until tonight. Okay, so let's just off top say that Thursday night is BK's radio show. Media will also meet with him prior to that. And we will probably, I don't know if we'll hear a final update on Chris Hilton, but LSU starting receiver was going to work through the week with a bone bruise, I believe is what it was, but put on the pads on Wednesday. A lot of it sounded like Matty B just worked with the trainers until he could get cleared to actually get on the field to see where he was at with the actual team. I mean, it was questionable to start the week. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Brian Kelly last year was kind of, if someone was questionable, they were like not playing at all, or maybe they played. Like there wasn't a rhyme or reason to it to me.
Yeah.
Like, I can't tell you
Well,
for sure.
Well, he did say, I believe, on the Wednesday teleconference, he said Chris Hilton was going to practice on
Yes,
Wednesday, or at
right.
least
So
try
that he
to
was going to
practice.
put on the pads and practice. So we'll hear how things are going. But if he does not play, he has talked about Kyle Parker being the immediate backup, the redshirt freshman. But really, they said we can move guys around. And that the order he mentioned would be Xavier Thomas getting more playing time than Aaron Anderson. This is basically no surprise, right? Like those are the two guys we would expect would be playing anyways, regardless of Chris being healthy or not.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at. Again, we'll get a clear picture tonight. I don't, like you said, I don't honestly don't think he's going to give us a concrete answer one way or the other tonight. He's probably going to say it's a game time decision, because the game is on Sunday, so they have a
Yeah,
full
Sunday
extra
afternoon.
day.
Yeah, full
Yeah.
extra day.
Yes, they have a full day to get ready. If he is, and we'll get into the offense in general, but if he is sidelined, I do think it is. It's not gonna make or break the game by any means, but it is substantial in a way. It's obviously you want his speed on the field at all times. So we'll get into that. We'll get into the offense, and obviously the defense as well, and what we expect from this game. But that's the only real injury update I think we needed to go over before we jump into all that. So, where do we start
Well,
with
let's
this?
go ahead and tell everybody. Shout out to all the new Bengal Tiger subs, both on YouTube and the site. You had just given YouTube a shout out for growing in a big way. Thank you for everyone. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube page and you're on YouTube right now watching, just click the button, click like. If you're listening, just remember, get on YouTube later and give us a follow. But a big thank you to everyone who has signed up this week with our kickoff deal. $4.99 a month is a steal. Matty B, we've churned out content plenty. You can go back and read anything we've done, dating back to any of the mock classes with recruiting or Matty B's fall camp coverage, anything you want. But it is 50% off annual. So, like I said, less than $5 a month. That's everybody out there who's an LSU fan that's listening can come up with that, I think, and pull it off. Come join us and hang out with us every day. We're on the board every single day. We're writing stories, scoop, tidbits, recruiting, team. Eddie B's about to drop some basketball scoop recruiting wise. So the promo code, you'll see it when you get on there. But if you go to the Bengal Tiger, kickoff 24, 24 is the promo code. That'll get you 50% off. And we have had a bunch of new signups this week. Don't make me beg. I'm looking at it right now, though, and we are sign up wise ahead of some SEC teams, Ole Miss,
South
Carolina. We're even ahead of Ohio State, but we're trailing, maybe most importantly, Southern Cal here by 6 signups in this promo. So at least push us past USC, the team that LSU opens against. But let's try to catch Georgia, Florida, Bama, Auburn, Texas, Oklahoma.
Let's do it.
LSU fans, don't let these teams, both old and new to the SEC, lap us out here. So let's get the signups up, and I promise you won't regret it. And if you do, just cancel, and then you don't have to regret it. So everything's good.
Easy. And
So
also,
these are our annual or weekly pods that we do every week. If you're first time listener to it, where we will preview the game. We do offense, defense. We do players to watch or players of the game predictions, score predictions, all the good stuff. Maddie B, you were there for every single fall camp practice. You can have the honor. Kick us off. Where do we go with this? LSU USC is 4:30 Central on Sunday.
I thought it was 6:30 Central.
I'm sorry, 6:30 Central, 4:30
Yeah.
in I'll be there, 4:30 in Las Vegas time on the West Coast. But ABC, the only game in that time slot, everyone will be watching. Top 25 matchup. How do you want to begin?
Okay, so do we start off with the positive or the, I don't want to say negative, but the much more scary side of things, which is the LSU defense against USC's offense?
To avoid asking a question, I just told you could pick, and then you asked a question about
I know.
how we
All right,
do.
let's start with LSU's offense. Let's start positive. Let's
Oh,
start
that's the
with,
positive. Okay,
of course,
we're
it
making
is.
progress.
I think, and for those who haven't already, check out my film studies, which are
Both of
both
them.
on the site now. LSU's offense and obviously LSU's defense, both sides of the ball. Looked at USC, wrote 1,400 words on the LSU offense versus USC defense, and I think 1,200 on the other side. So a lot of work and content, on that, on the scheme and everything like that. I think looking at USC's defense, you have to start with Coach Lynn, the defensive coordinator that they hired from UCLA. Went back and watched their games against Washington State, Arizona, and USC last year. So you're talking Cam Ward, Noah Fafita, and Caleb Williams as those three quarterbacks. I was really impressed with UCLA's, obviously their pass rush. We knew because they had a first-round defensive end talent, and they had the Murphy twins, who I knew from North Texas, transferred to UCLA, were terrific. So they had a lot of talent on that defense in terms of up front, but I think in coverage, it was tight. It was really impressive, Lynn's scheme and the way he was able to keep those talented quarterbacks off balance. That's why they were a top 10, 12 defense in the country last year, and Lynn deserves a lot of credit for that. So I left, in terms of just the basics of, Joe Sloan versus D'Anton Lynn, that's going to be an interesting matchup in itself. And then you get to, I think, the most intriguing unit versus unit to me is USC's secondary against LSU's receivers. I think that's just going to be fascinating because USC has legitimate playmakers in the back end, and their secondary is their strength, their defense. You're talking about Kamari Ramsey, transfer from UCLA, Keely Arnold, transfer from Oregon State. Both of them were really good. Then you go to the corners, and I think John Humphrey's good, and Greedy Vance, transfer from Florida State. I'm not even sure he's going to start, but you have Jalen Smith, Jacoby Covington. So the USC secondary is the strength, and that's going to be a good test. It's going to be a really good test for LSU's receivers and Garrett Nussmeier to start off the season. So that's kind of where I start when assessing this defense.
If you haven't read Matty B's 2 film studies, they're great because he breaks it all down, like you said, from where USC's defensive coordinator was at UCLA a year ago with gifts in there and film, and then kind of where the actual USC defense is at with him taking over. 2 things jumped out at me, and I'll let you kind of break it down further. One, you touched on. A lot of it was about those quarterbacks he faced, and you mentioned USC's DBs being very good, but how they were able to get pressure, how they were able to really, even against some, as you noted, current NFL quarterbacks, future NFL quarterbacks, very talented guys, come up with some success for a UCLA team that wasn't great, right?
Yeah.
But where you got me was exactly what you said, and maybe we should start off is the run game. Like, is the strength of USC's defense stopping the pass or stopping the run? And after kind of putting together how their DC approached things at UCLA with what you kind of broke down with what USC has, this seems like we will very quickly find out the answer to, can LSU run the football without Jaden Daniels? Can you run with just your run game. Because as you noted, like Bear Alexander is a good player, a great player. However you want to slice it at DT, very serviceable, more than serviceable. They've got a Vandy transfer in at DT. They've got a couple capable edge rushers and some big linebackers. But can you run the football on that front seven? I don't know. And look, we've talked about this early on the mailbag pod. It was a point of conversation the past 2 years if LSU could run the football with just the running backs and no Jaden Daniels. And now we'll get a real answer because Garrett Nussmeier isn't going to run the football all over the field. Is that where we start? Like, is that the number one question that you look up and say LSU lost the game and it was because, look, they couldn't run the ball on early downs. They put us in these situations where it was third and long, et cetera. And you really played into the hands of what USC wants to do, which is their most talented group is their DBs. So they want to get you into passing situations and third and long. I would think that means Joe Sloan and company are trying to establish the run here in this football game early and often.
I definitely think they need to establish the run. And I know it sounds like you could say that about every football game. It's like, oh, the coaches want to establish the run.
And last year, I wouldn't care if they established a run. Just go throw it all over them. And
well, when you have Jaden Daniels and those receivers, it's like, who cares? But remember, last year, we had the same problem. Florida State game, they start off the year, Jaden Daniels, 15 carries for 64 yards. Cool. I'm looking at it now. It's like the other three backs combined for 12 carries and
they all had like 5 carries.
Yeah, it was nothing from the run game, from the traditional run game. And that's what you cannot have this year because if we say the strength of the USC defense is the secondary, and I think they're going to be able to match up fairly well with LSU's receivers. I still think LSU's receivers are better in a vacuum than, the corners they're going up against, but still the front 7 or the front 6 or however you want to size it for USC is definitely the weaker of the units. So Will Campbell comes out on Tuesday and says, we're running the ball. I don't care who knows. You can tell USC that's our game plan. We're going to run the ball on them. They can't stop us. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. All right, well, let's see it. Let's see. I think this should be a game where you are able to dictate things with your offensive line, especially with a Will Campbell and Garrett Dellinger, who are not shy and who graded out really well in run blocking last year. I think Miles Frazier and DJ Chester are going to have to prove it a little bit more, but that's the test for the offensive line here is can you move Bear Alexander out of the way? Can you move Nate Clifton out of the way? Like, if they can run the ball, I don't see how the USC stops them flat out because I still think Garrett Nussmeier is going to have a good game. I still think Kyron Lacey is going to have a good game. Mason Taylor, like you go down the list. If they run the ball, makes them unstoppable. And so that's where I'm at with them. Now, I will say what makes it interesting to me is the linebackers that they have, Issa Mascarenas Arnold. I can never say his name. I'll just call him Arnold. Arnold and Cobb looked at their PFF grades last year and watched some of their film. They're definitely more run stoppers than coverage guys. Like, I believe Arnold graded out like almost 80 in run defense and then like 55 or something in pass coverage. So it makes it interesting in that the linebackers themselves, you can expose them maybe in the pass game. But other than that, I do look at I look at LSU to be able to run the ball, and that will kind of determine the game. If they average only 3.5 yards per carry or something like that, or 4 yards per carry, and they're not able to rip off any significant runs.
By games in, you need to be averaging more than 5 yards a carry.
Yeah, especially because you should probably pop one of these runs at some point if you're able to be able to carve out some holes for Caleb Jackson. Like, there should be some 12, 15-yard gains sprinkled in there at some point. So, yeah, the run game is going to be huge. I think that's what everybody knows. I think LSU knows that going in. I think USC knows that going in. I think once they do set it up, like I said, they can attack those linebackers. That's where a Mason Taylor comes in. That's where if they're, maybe an Aaron Anderson can come in across the on a drag or something like that. Like, you can attack those linebackers in different ways, but you have to get them off balance. You have to set them up with the run. And I think that's what LSU is going to do.
You played right into it. So I said 2 things jumped out to me. The second one was the running the football on a USC team whose strength may be their secondary. 2 was, and I had written down your exact wordage here or verbiage, You called them lumbering linebackers in coverage.
Yeah.
When I hear that, I think immediately of Mason Taylor, and then these two 6'6" tight ends, Trades Green and Kamorian Pimpton, who we say these guys are mismatches for any linebacker out there or any, nickel out there. And if you've got bigger linebackers, heavier linebackers that may not be as good in coverage as they are against the run, as you noted in your piece, Nussmeier needs to take advantage of when they give it to him, these short and intermediate throws. Is it too much for me to say that this could be a massive Mason Taylor game? That this could be a game where Pimpton and Green make a few catches, or Aaron Anderson or Xavier Thomas, coming across the middle, they get some drag routes. That's the key that then opens up this deep vertical game or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think this is, and so that's what a lot of people, or some people ask me as well, was like, is this just a Mason Taylor game? And it definitely feels that way. And I don't think USC's like, I'm interested to see how USC uses the safeties, because Kelly Arnold, I believe, had like a 90 coverage PFF grade and was, I mean, just watch the tape of him. He's really good. And then Kamari Ramsey, I think, is a really good player as well. So, like, do those safeties come down and have to help out against Mason Taylor, against like Kamorian Pimpton, against, Xavier Thomas or whatnot? And then you have to have Kyron Lacey and CJ Daniels, and we'll see about Chris Hilton. But then you have to have your perimeter players start winning. Like, they just have to win. And that's where, as much as I think the run game is going to set up everything, and as much as the tight ends, I think, will set up a lot of things and give them, put them in position to have success, Nussmeier is going to have to make some throws. You go back and watch. I clipped it in there as well. It's like Noah Fafita last year had an awesome game against UCLA, like tore them up. But you look at the throws; they weren't easy throws. Like, he was making awesome plays on the move to McMillan, throws to McMillan. Like, he was hitting guys in stride and in tight areas. So that's kind of where I'm looking at. Nussmeier is going to have to be really sharp still, even if everything else goes right.
And you mentioned the USC's defensive coordinator at USC, who was at UCLA previously, brought so much pressure against these quarterbacks. But then we look at things like the Arizona game. You mentioned Fafita, the plays you put into your film study, and I watched that game. So often Arizona would just say, okay, you're going to do that. Then we're just going to go ahead and beat you to the punch. We're going to call plays that are rollout plays, that where we move the pocket immediately, where we're doing this and that. How good where do you stack Nussmeier up on off-platform throws, getting outside the pocket? Because he is much more of a pocket presence quarterback than a Jaden Daniels. But how did you see him in fall camp when he was moved, whether it was by design with Sloan or, hey, I have to evade, the blitz here, and now I'm rolling right and I'm going to have to either throw it deep or, on a shallow cross, whatever it might be, a comeback. How good is he outside the pocket?
I think he's really good off platform. I think the arm talent kind of speaks for itself. I think he's able to make a lot of like throws across his body in a way that you don't really advise a lot of quarterbacks, but we've seen it time after time. We've seen it. I think you go back to the Georgia game, there are times where he's rolling out and just slings it. I mean, the spring game, right? He steps up in the pocket and, like, off balance throws a 50-yard bomb for a touchdown. It's like, I trust his arm talent to get the ball there.
His arm talent's there.
Yeah, the question becomes the timing. The question becomes, in these situations against Lynn's defense, is you have to be really, really sharp with your decision making and being accurate here. Is that, can he do that for a full 60 minutes against, I think, a defense that isn't great, but I think will be coached up well in a similar way that we look at LSU's defense and being coached up well. So I left just watching Lynn's scheme from UCLA and, looking at some of the players individually as saying, I think this is a better defense than I thought going into it. I still think LSU's offense should have success and should be able to move the ball fairly well and score, in the high 30s or something like that.
Is USC's defense personnel-wise, player to player, better than LSU's?
That's an interesting point. So I actually talked about this with a friend. The front six, or let's say it's a 4-2-5 for both of them, whatnot. The front six, LSU is better. I'm confidently saying LSU is better in the front six. in the secondary, I might take almost all 5 of USC's secondary players than LSU's. So
Okay.
that's where it becomes like I'm taking the front 6 of LSU, I'm taking the secondary of USC.
When you think of, let me ask you this, if Chris Hilton's a no-go here, or limited or whatever it might be, I think in people's minds, because he is quite athletic and we've seen it,
Yeah.
he's that vertical guy, right? Like Brian Thomas could stretch the field vertically. Chris Hilton's got speed for days. If Chris Hilton's a 10 on stretching the field vertically, where is CJ Daniels and Kyron Lacy? Who are your number 1 and 2 receivers? Where do they fit into that kind of realm of, hey, they can beat you over the top?
I'd have Lacy at an 8 and maybe CJ at like a 7. And CJ obviously made a ton of big plays last year at Liberty, so this isn't saying he can't make big plays, but in that way of taking the top off the defense, he was more of a contested catches guy. You know, he has phenomenal hands and route running and physical traits. He's just not a burner, obviously, in the way that Hilton is. So they're different. But to your point, I do think if they don't have Hilton, it is somewhat of a blow, right? It's you go to Kyle Parker, you go to Xavier Thomas or whatever, they're not as fast as Chris Hilton. It's just flat out.
Xavier's got speed, but
He does.
he's
It's just
also the type where, yeah, get him into space. He's an Aaron Anderson too. Get him into space and let him do what he does.
yeah. So it's going to
You
be interesting if Hilton can't go. How if it changes anything at all about Lynn's safeties or anything like that, how they play Lacy, because I still wouldn't want if Lacy's in a one-on-one matchup, I'm still throwing him the damn ball. Like that's not a question, but the question is if you can't take the top off the defense in that way, does that limit anything, I guess, or does that let the safeties step down a bit more? That's what I'm interested to watch for.
I think that too, and it just kind of jogged my memory when you're saying this short and intermediate game or taking advantage of it when you can pop some of these shorter throws. When we think about tight ends or, you're just trying to move the sticks here and there. And we said it before last year, and then it became true on third downs. They were just going to throw it to Malik Neighbors. I said, that's my prediction. Anytime they need a first down, they'll just throw it to Malik Neighbors. And they did, or Jaden would run it. Brian Kelly, when asked, not just Kyle Parker backs up Chris Hilton at that position, but they said, what has he done to warrant as a redshirt freshman who's got no real significant game time experience, being someone you mentioned in this moment? And he said, look, this offseason, and then most notably in fall camp, his route running hands and then being in the places he's supposed to be were excellent. And he said that's what makes Kyle Parker stand out above the rest. And really, we said this in high school, of all those receivers that signed, Jalen Brown, Shelton Sampson, Kai Preon, he was the one that was most ready. And we saw it in Texas high school football. He was a great route runner, good hands, could make plays after the catch. I think that maybe we're overlooking that a bit. Like I can see Kyle Parker having a few catches in this game that are notable that, may not go for 20 something yards, but 8, 10, 12, and you've moved the sticks and you're like, glad we've got that guy in there.
Yeah.
Then that buys you time to either keep running the ball, pop it to Kyron or Lacy, or get Aaron Anderson and Xavier Thomas involved, who are Aaron's healthy and Xavier is healthy as well. He battled a little bit of an injury in camp, but he hasn't had any real injury history. Those are some Louisiana receivers that, look, obviously Anderson was at Bama and LSU, battled injury both times, hasn't really had that chance to prove it. He was an insane high school player in terms of just put the ball in his hands and let him go. And we've heard that out of camp. And then Xavier Thomas has already proven he's that person, and he was the same guy in high school. I think we're maybe also overlooking a little bit of, could they be the guys who pop big plays in this game?
Yeah, I definitely think I think LSU is going to be explosive because I think Nussmeier is going to kind of force their hand. I think Nussmeier will give them chances to make plays, and I think they're going to make those. I think the receivers are awesome. So
the key is no turnover. You mentioned in your piece, Drake, LSU may turn it over once or twice. I think that could be cataclysmic. Like, I think they need to play a 1-0 turnover game here.
I think that's fair. UCLA last year, for context, I think was definitely was top 15 in the country in turnovers. 12th. They were 12th in turnovers. I know they had 15 interceptions on the year last year. UCLA did. So, we're looking at a very well coached defense in terms of their scheme and what they try to do. So, I mean, they turned over Caleb Williams a couple times. Like I said, Fafita, even though he had a great game, I think had made some tight throws there. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Nussmeier. This isn't as, when you looked at it on paper, I think a month or two ago, it was like, okay, well, this is an awesome offense against a bad defense for both sides of the ball. I think you look at it both ways now, and I'm feeling better about LSU's defense than I did in fall camp, and I feel like USC's defense is in a better spot than I previously expected, at least on paper.
I think you can obviously point out a lot of similarities between the two programs,
Ton.
whether you're saying head
So many.
coach, both going into their third year, whether you're saying it's kind of a win now, not win now mode. LSU's won back-to-back 10-win seasons. Both these teams, though, are replacing Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks who went 1 and 2 in the draft. So Miller Moss and Nussmeier have a good amount on their plate to kind of unknown wise to carry through this season of how far each team can go. And then defensively, we're bad last year, which resulted in the hires of new coaches on that side of the ball, new defensive coordinators, new installations of how they're going to play defense. I do think that there are a ton of some, and look, even a Zachariah Branch is considered one of the most electric return men in college football. Xavier Thomas isn't far behind. He was one of the best return men in the SEC, which makes him one of the best in the country. I think there's more similarities to these two than differences, really. Like positionally, yeah, the DBs could be better at USC than LSU. I'll take LSU's O-line over USC's O-line any day of the week.
Yeah.
There's a lot of spots where one's better than the other, and then there's some pushes. But the more that I think after I read your two film studies, I realized, man, these two teams have a lot of the same questions of where you're at entering year 3 of each head coach's tenure.
It's incredible. Like you keep reading it, or you keep looking into these two teams, and you're like,
I
okay,
mean, this doesn't matter at all, but I wonder how many games in college football history were season openers that were two teams that were replacing Heisman winning quarterbacks.
yeah, I never. I mean, how many? It can't be many times because obviously,
Caleb obviously won it the year before Jaden did. So.
Yeah, for the most part, obviously, there's not many sophomore or underclassmen winning Heisman quarterbacks already. So it's like you go back to Johnny Manziel.
Throw
maybe.
in that caveat too that went 1-2 in the draft.
Yeah, it's
maybe
like
then it's never.
Yeah, it's never. And then you go into coaches being in their third year. You go into new defensive coordinators. I mean, it's a very, very interesting situation. So let's flip it. Let's flip it over, and we can talk about the LSU defense versus USC offense.
We can talk forever about LSU offense. Good job starting out there on the positive. Now you're going negative. Or is it a negative?
We talked about it last. We talked about it last.
They finished 108 in total defense. If they're in the top 60-50 range,
we talked about it last podcast. Right? We feel better about LSU's defense now than we obviously did going into fall camp. Fall camp, there's ample amount of questions we didn't know. We leave fall camp saying, all right, the defensive line, it might not be an outright strength, but it's not going to be a weakness, I don't think, for this team. And especially off the edges, I think they're going to be really good, and we feel really good about the linebackers. All right, cool. Put that away. The secondary is still a question mark for me personally. I know a lot of people, we like Ashton Stamps. I know we're interested to see Major Burns. We're interested to see Jordan Gilbert, so on and so forth, Sage Ryan. But the secondary is still the question to me, and I think that's what this game kind of comes down to, is how far along is this LSU secondary going against this USC offense? Because I know it's just one game, but Miller Moss looked damn good in that bowl game, like really sharp. He surprised me at how the timing of some of these things, some of the throws that he made, and the accuracy. It's like it was there. So
I went back
in that game.
I went back and watched some of those plays too, though, the touchdown throws, because he threw like 5 touchdowns in that game.
6 or 5, 6, yeah.
6, whatever. The receivers went up and made some plays.
They did.
As well. Like those could have easily been incompletions. I'm not saying that then they wouldn't have scored. I'm just saying that he wasn't diming on the money dudes who were running wide open. He threw it down there and guys went up and made plays.
And I mentioned this in the article. 2 of those drives started at within the 25, almost in the red zone, because there was a blocked punt and a fumble early in the first half that kind of set the tone and gave them 2 kind of free touchdowns. But still, Miller Moss, I don't think I don't think he's as good as Nussmeier. I'm not saying that by any means. I do think he has some arm talent, though, that can put the ball in places. And those receivers that you mentioned that did make those plays, a lot of them returned because Brendan Rice didn't play in that bowl game. So they had, I don't remember the full list of receivers. Obviously, Branch returns, but Branch didn't even have a huge game besides that long return he had. But Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon, Deuce Robinson, they're all back and they can make plays. So while I don't think this USC receiving core is as good as LSU's, I still think it's a pretty good receiving core in a vacuum and a group that can make some plays over the top if LSU's DBs aren't ready. I said it last year with Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman that they're going to get exposed. This year, I don't, they don't have that level of talent, USC, but they have a pretty good receiving core that can make some plays if LSU's not ready.
They both said that they knew each other coming out of high school, that Miller Moss and Nuss, both quarterbacks for these teams. Miller Moss had a quote this week when they said, well, if y'all were friends back in the day, have you talked recently? And he said, no, we don't do that kind of stuff during game week. And they said, well, when was the last time you heard from him? And he said, happy birthday. Nuss texted me, happy birthday, Miller, about 6 months ago. So these two do know each other. Obviously, these kids go through Elite 11 and all that kind of stuff. But that class, which is funny to look back at now, Garrett Nussmeier, On3 we had not launched On3 yet, but so this is putting together 24/7 ESPN rivals. I'll give you the industry ranking. Nuss was the number 11 quarterback in the country, signed with LSU. Miller Moss was recruited by LSU, obviously, but in that class, Quinn Ewers was 1, Caleb Williams was 2, Jackson Dart was 7, Drake May was 8, JJ McCarthy was 9, Nuss 11, Jalen Milroe at Bama 12, Preston Stone 14. He's starting at SMU, obviously. Stayed home and played there. Miller Moss checks in at 22 in that group. So you get a feel for, not often too, there's another parallel. How many guys, and I skipped over some that either did not pan out or transferred a bunch. Miller Moss and Nuss just sat at the school they signed with from the 2021 signing class until now. And that doesn't happen a lot. I mean, I just listed you off the Drake Mays and Caleb Williams of the world who are in the NFL now. And they waited behind Jaden. They waited, and Nuss waited behind multiple quarterbacks, but behind Caleb Williams, behind Jaden. Now it's their turn. So you've got that parallel as well. How many schools out there have a quarterback who sat 4 years to be the starter?
Yeah.
Not many.
That's the
quarterback have good quarterbacks that sat 4 years to be the starter.
There you go. I think Moss, the arm talent is there. He's not as mobile, I don't think, as Nussmeier by any means. I don't think he's going to really hurt LSU over the top. They ran some really interesting RPOs to keep it simple for him, which I think he executed pretty well. I wrote in the story, though, kind of give you a little tidbit here. It's like you could tell Lincoln Riley made the game easy for him, I think, in that bowl game in a lot of ways. And so you gave him 1-2 reads. I think it was fairly obvious that he was able to stick on those for the most part against Louisville. And the one interception he had was on a first read and just kind of threw an interception, just kind of threw an out route when it wasn't open. So if LSU can take away those first reads, then I think it makes him hold the ball a tick longer, and that's what lets LSU's pass rush ultimately get home. So, again, the secondary is going to have to be aggressive. It's going to have to hold up. It's going to have to survive, even if LSU brings pressure and maybe doesn't hit home, or maybe they have to take away the first read of Miller Moss. So that's kind of what I'm interested in right now.
What is the thought process of, because again, if y'all are not on the Bengal Tiger, $4.99 a month for a year is a steal with that Kickoff 24 promo code. Just go to thebengaltiger.com, click sign up. You won't regret it. And you get to hang out with us every day on the board. But stuff like this, I think, is so worth it. Matty B, I think you did a great job of breaking this down and looking at what USC did a year ago and what Moss did in that bowl game against Louisville, and then trying to kind of carry it over a season, which is tough, but to give you a feel for what's going to happen. And if I had to go in here and do a search for names, and let's just see, I'll do it right now. You mentioned Zachariah Branch, more than anyone you did else beyond Miller Moss in the film study. What's the key here to stopping a guy who was a former 5-star freshman a year ago, made waves because of what he did in the return game? But you're looking at a 5'10", 172-pound player who has speed for days. I mean, he was a 10-4 kid. He was a 21 in the 200 meter. He was 24-foot long jump. I mean, this is the type of guy when LSU signs these freaky receivers from Louisiana who are track stars and all that. Like, that's what Zachariah Branch is. But when you view his game, his hands, his route running, all of this, like, how are they going to use him versus LSU, knowing that LSU's weakness is their secondary?
Yeah. First of all, I'll mention how they used him, because last year he ended up with 31 catches for 320 yards and 2
That
touchdowns.
doesn't blow me away.
Yeah, it's not like he was doing anything out of the ordinary. And honestly, his longest catch of the year was 21 yards. So we look at this, or 26 yards, sorry. But we look at this, or that was his longest rush. His longest reception was 36 yards, which still, he's not blowing the top off of defenses for the most part. I do think this year he's going to be used more effectively, and because honestly they need him, I think this year. Now, they used him on some screens, they used him on some drag routes, some RPO stuff. So I'm interested to see if he's able to really become that receiver that I think we expect him to be this year, because he did have some drops last year and in the bowl game. Like, there were some plays where I thought he was going to make it and then he ends up dropping it. So are the hands there for Branch? Is he able to get separation as a route runner? Those are just details where you pair that with the incredible speed and playmaking after the catch, then you have a real problem on your hands as LSU's defense. But ultimately, he is just someone you have to account for, because when he catches the ball, he's going to immediately challenge your tackling. He's going to, in a week 1 game where we saw week 0, the tackling is not good early in the season for college football players. You have to tackle this guy. And so I'm interested to see if LSU's defense is ready for that. Can LSU's secondary, the Sage Ryans, the Jordan Gilberts, the Jordan Allens, are y'all ready to tackle Zachariah Branch? Can you catch Zachariah Branch? And you have to keep him in front of you, and you have to make the tackles. So that's where my concern is with Branch more than anything.
I thought one interesting thing, and shout out to Wilson at The Advocate for writing this. I had read it this morning before we got on the pod, but he talked about something you wrote a good bit about, which is what Blake Baker calls havoc rate. Really, it's just the ability to be aggressive. And when he lined up the numbers with what Matt House did a year ago, it was pretty stark in contrast. I mean, it made Matt House's defense at LSU look like one that was never aggressive, that never blitzed, that was bend, don't break. And Brian Kelly came out and said, this is not a bend, don't break defense. This is one that's going to keep you guessing. And look, Blake Baker went to Missouri and had him with 2 top 30 defenses. And a large part of that, as you pointed out, was how much they were able to kind of keep offenses guessing and then just blitz and get after the quarterback. This is a game where it feels like, and you pointed it out, that Miller Moss isn't a quarterback who wants to run the football. He wants to sit in the pocket and throw it. The key seems then, right, how quickly can you get to Miller Moss with not just pressure from your front 4, like bringing Harold Perkins, bringing, an extra blitzer, whatever it might be. How often do you see that being something that comes into play this weekend? Because far too often last year, we just sat around and watched a Matt House defense that just wouldn't adjust. Year 1, they would come out of halftime and look so great on adjustments. Last year, there were just never an answer. And I don't think we're going to get that with Blake Baker. I think that in-game adjustments will be solid, but more so, I think that even with the amount of time they've had to prep for this one, you'd have to think that priority number 1 is just get after Miller Moss and make him make throws, because even in your film study, and this is probably what Lincoln Riley wanted Miller Moss doing for his first start. I believe that, yeah, his first career start was the bowl game when Caleb sat out. You put in there one of the gifts. They were up 28-14. They're about to go up 35-14, blow this game away by the second quarter about to start. And he goes first read on a play at the goal line where when you look at it, you're like, the corner was standing in front of the receiver when he threw it. Like, it was so easy to not only just pick off, but then pick six it. I mean, he had to beat Miller Moss, and I don't know if he did or not, if he pick six it.
I think he got down to like the other 40 or something like that.
Okay, so it was a terrible, like, it was so obvious that it was going to get picked. Now Miller Moss has time to grow in the offseason. He won't be just first read only. But if he's having to go through reads, you want to then get that pressure on him. So for me, after reading your film study and knowing who Miller Moss is as a quarterback, maybe it's a lot like Nussmeier. I'm getting after him. I'm trying to bring pressure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it has to be the game plan. Like I think I wrote in the story, the LSU's defensive backs might get beat or might, maybe lose a jump ball here or there or something like that. I think the difference in this year compared to last year is LSU won't fold in the second half the way it did against Florida State. Like, if anything, Blake Baker's going to try something new and bring pressure in a different way to maybe make that throw from Miller Moss difficult and make it a tougher reception. So maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but I think LSU's in a much better spot to challenge Miller Moss than what Louisville did last year, than what LSU did to Florida State or anybody really last year. So that's where the confidence comes from, in that the havoc rate, the blitz rate, the pressures. Like, Miller Moss should feel LSU this weekend. Miller Moss should feel uncomfortable at some point. I'm not saying for the entire game. I'm sure he'll make some plays, but there will be plays where Harold Perkin hits him. There's going to be plays where Savion Jones, Braden Swinson hit him. Those plays need to unsettle him in a way that make him where he doesn't want to have to go through a second read or a third read. He wants to get the ball out of his hands fast. And then that's where LSU, hopefully, the athleticism and the speed up front and that linebacker can really put pressure on USC and slow them down in that way. So, again, in this game, LSU's defense does not have to be perfect. You're in a situation where LSU's offense, I think, is going to score points. So just get a couple stops. You talked about Garrett Nussmeier's interceptions. Same thing here with Miller Moss. If Miller Moss throws a pick or two, we're looking at this game saying I think it's basically over, because LSU should, in theory, be able to score the ball enough to keep USC at a distance if they turn them over.
I really liked the quotes that some of the guys gave this week and in weeks prior about Blake Baker's defense, Matty B. But whether it was the D tackles like Paez and Guillory, they were talking about the linebackers, Eric. Look, even if we mess up a run fit, whatever it is, he said, these guys, Perkins, Penn, the Weeks, they're coming downhill so fast that they make up for it. And Weeks said that Blake Baker got onto him in film study. He said every counter run needs to be a tackle for loss. And they had one tackle for loss, went for 2 yards. They were happy about it. Blake Baker said, that's ridiculous. That should have been a 5-yard tackle for loss. So I think we're going to see, for better or worse, a very aggressive defense here coming out of the gates.
Yeah. And you mentioned the counter runs. I didn't write, like, I wrote about the USC rushing attack. It wasn't anything special last year.
So take us there, because we talk all about Miller Moss, these receivers, LSU's defensive backfield, trying to be aggressive. Like, is USC going to run the football?
That's going to be the interesting part. Again, I think Louisville's kind of it's not what exactly USC is going to look like this year, but it's our best point of reference. They didn't run the ball effectively really at all, besides one run that popped for 35 yards. Outside of that, it was something like I don't remember the exact number. There was like 3 yards a carry before that run. So I don't have high expectations for USC's run game. Also, because you look at PFF grades and just honestly how they looked as a rushing offensive line, they were not very crisp in a lot of ways. So I'm not super concerned with USC's rushing attack in this game here. Now, maybe this is where they surprise me and they're able to run the ball, all over them, but they ran that counter play that you talked about a lot. It was their bread and butter. And so if that continues to be the case this year, the hope is that Greg Penn and Harold Perkins and Whit Weeks and Wes Weeks can shoot a couple of those, and that the defense tackles don't get shoved out the way really quickly. And so I'm not terribly concerned with USC's rushing attack or the offensive line in the run game. That's maybe that comes back to bite me, but at this point, I think LSU will hold up fine in that regard.
From talking to our folks on the USC side, they expect the running back rotation to be Woody Marks, Quentin Joyner, and then Amarian Peterson if they get that deep. If you look at Woody Marks and Quentin Joyner and what they did a year ago, Quentin Joyner carried it 18 times all season. Yeah. Woody Marks was a guy that where was he even at a year ago?
He was at Mississippi State.
That's right.
3 or 4 years, and he was under Leach. He was a receiving back. That was his MO. I think he maybe has a record for receiving yards as a running back or something like that at Mississippi State. Whatever it is, like he's caught 100 plus passes or something like that in his career. So he's a receiving back. He can obviously run the ball as well. He's very talented. I'm not saying he can't, but he's definitely a back that gives them some versatility out of the backfield. So.
And Woody Marks is Jaquavius Marks for those who don't know Woody, but notice that name. Jaquavius Marks, he was a player out of Georgia.
He's caught 214 passes in his career. He caught 83 in 2021 alone.
Let's look at last year. And he was playing an SEC schedule. Played LSU, had 8 carries for 75 yards in that game. That's 9.4 yards a carry, but he popped off a 52-yard run on that LSU defense. So that obviously kind of skews those numbers a good bit, but their starting running back one, Quentin Joyner, or their two, had 18 carries as a true freshman. That's not a ton of experience at all. But then a guy like Joyner, you look at what he did at State, and beyond that LSU game, Ole Miss 12 carries for 39 yards, Southern Miss 12 for 34 yards, Arkansas 17 for 42. These are all, if you're a math whiz, you've already done the math. That's 3 yards a carry, 2.5 yards a carry. Any other games I'm looking at? South Carolina game, they lost 12 carries for 27 yards, 2.3 yards a carry.
Yeah.
So the most action he got was the Arizona, which actually USC played as well. They went to overtime, 24 for 123. That would be, he eclipsed 5 yards. And then in southeastern Louisiana, I'm not even going to count that, 19 carries, 127. So as the season went on, though,
he was antsy to get out of there, I think, at a certain point with Mississippi State's offense, the way it was.
That's why I say that people are sleeping on Xavier Thomas. If you caught 500 yards in Mississippi State's offense last year in the post-Leach era, rest in peace, that was saying so. That's 1,000 yards in LSU's offense. They were terrible at throwing the football.
Yeah.
And they weren't that great at running it clearly either.
Yeah. So he's definitely someone you have to account for. Again, that
might be. I don't think he's. I don't like him any more than I do Caleb Jackson or Josh Williams.
No, he's not a game breaker in that way. He's a good back. He's a good veteran back. I think he's maybe a little bit more talented than Josh Williams, but he is that like Josh Williams type player, right? 5th-year guy, catch passes, knows what he's doing at all times. He is someone that's going to settle in Miller Moss the same way Josh Williams can settle in Garrett Nussmeier. So.
And Amarian Peterson, their running back 3, had 2 carries last year. So this is not a running back group that you look at and you're like, man, they've got some experience. Yeah, some with Marks, but I don't see any game break. Like I would definitely think that the talk belongs on what Miller Moss does in year 1, and then what Zachariah Branch, Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, if you get into the Kyle Fords of the receiving group, what they can do, because that's got to be the strength, right? Like of the USC offense is what they do with those wide Deuce Robinson, what they do with these wide receivers, because even at tight end, Luke McCree and Carson Tabarici, Deuce Robinson's more of a tight end than those guys at times, just with his size. But I'd take LSU's tight ends over those guys any day of the week. So what is truly the strength of the USC offense? Is it what Miller Moss and these receivers can do?
Yeah, I think it's gonna have to be the pass game, and honestly, it's gonna have to be Lincoln Riley. Like Lincoln is gonna have to. I'm sure USC fans say the same thing. It's like, all right, you have a new quarterback, you have new weapons in some spots, but you still have enough talent here. I think if you're Lincoln Riley to, you may not have a Heisman winning quarterback like you've had a lot of times in the past, but this is going to have to be an offense where he's going to have to be creative and he's going to have to keep Blake Baker off the front foot. But ultimately, I think this does set up well for LSU's defense to maybe get a couple stops and maybe a couple turnovers. So,
What do we do? I mean, I know we've talked about USC's offense defensively. We've talked about wanting to bring the blitz. We've talked about the D tackle situation being the one you're kind of worried about to see. Maybe you like Jacoby and Guillory. You know, Gio Paez coming from Wisconsin. Matty B's played a ton and it's kind of moving into this new role from being a nose to being playing alongside a nose like Guillory. And maybe that helps his ability to make an impact in the game, and we can see what these backups do. But we feel fine about their DNs and edge rushers, and we love the LSU linebackers, and we know they've got questions in this secondary. Is there anything you're looking at on LSU's defense beyond this havoc rate, which, and I'll go back to what Blake Baker said, increasing the havoc rate is what he said took a terrible Missouri defense when he was hired to one that he was able to top 30 defense in the country in back-to-back seasons, increasing it a certain percentage. And I think he said like 10% is what he'd like to have it increase to. They were at 20% havoc rate at Missouri twice, 19 and 20% in the 2 years he was there. For comparison's sake, LSU was far below that. I think they were in the 15% range or lower, rarely blitzing outside the top 60 nationally. And Blake Baker's exact thing was, I want it up by 10%, which means a 25% havoc rate. That would be one of the higher in college football.
well, I think he knows they need to.
They have to, right? That's like the only answer. That's the answer.
If you sit back again, maybe this secondary surprises me, but
Bend don't break, as Brian Kelly said, is not the approach, and I couldn't agree more. What you do, this defense doesn't set up well for bend don't break.
yeah. So ultimately, you have to take some chances, take some risks, and we'll see how it plays out because I think USC's offense is very capable. But it's week one. We're going to learn a lot in this week. We're going to see what this defense can do, what it can't do, and that's why I love these week one games being against good teams. Is that we don't have to ask questions anymore. If they played in FCS school or something, then we'd be like, okay, well, how much does it matter and whatnot? Everything matters in this game. This game holds a ton of weight for both sides, and we're going to learn a ton about both sides. And I think from an LSU perspective, Blake Baker immediately gets to see and show what he's done with this team.
And I think, yeah, and you talked about it earlier, and it goes back to it. You can blitz Miller Moss all day. He might know, hey, look, obvious. They might know. They will know. They're going to try to get after us. Let's just get the ball out quickly. There's the completion. It's a 4-yard completion tackle.
Yeah.
Because how often did we look last year and LSU missed? Not just busted coverage, but tackle after tackle in the open field that led to touchdowns or big gains or whatever it was. And week one is so tough for that because you've not been live tackling against another opponent. So you're going in with a bit of unknown there. I think that's going to be one of the biggest things. I mean, I talk about turnover rate. Maybe right behind that is which team tackles better on defense, who has the higher tackle rate.
For sure. All right. You want to jump to an ad and then we can do our.
Yeah, let's do a little Myperfectfranchise because we knocked out Game Time already, but you can still get on Game Time, download the app, check it out, all that, and check out for these USC LSU tickets. See if you want to jump on any. Prices are still going down, but Myperfectfranchise, you guys know him, Andy Ludicky. We've had board posters reach out and say they've already hooked up with Andy this season. He's helped him out in a big way. But Andy Ludicky, myperfectfranchise.net, spelled exactly as you would think it is. He's been in this business for multiple decades. He's owned franchises. He's co-owned, part-time owner of franchises, and then has helped a lot of people in the hundreds set up franchises, and really wants to hold your hand more or less into getting into it because if you've not been in that business, you don't know much about it. And that's what Andy says he's here for. That, hey, look, he's been there, he learned about it. Now he's sharing that knowledge, and it is free to give him a call. 404-973-9901. I actually almost know this number by heart now. I don't even know if I know my wife's cell phone number by heart, but I do enough outreach for this one. 404-973-9901. Or email him, Andy, A-N-D-Y, at myperfectfranchise.net. Every time we say it, it's 100% free, absolutely free to call him and just say, hey, look, heard about you on the Bengal Tiger, heard about you on this podcast. I just want to know, is this for me? I've got an idea. Is this even a franchise idea? How do I open a Chick-fil-A? Anything that you've got out there, he's got an answer for. And it can be a side hustle. It can be something maybe you want. Your kids are coming out of college and you're saying, okay, what do they want to do? Well, they've got interest in business. Have them call them up and just feel out what's out there. What are people doing? And as Andy said, as a consultant and a franchise owner, he's dealt with everything. And whether it's, hey, I don't have a ton of money, what kind of financial requirements are needed here? Is it, how much time do I have committed? I have a full-time job. Like, so what can I actually do here on the side and make it work? He's got answers for it all. Big shout out to him because he has helped so many folks in the Bengal Tiger out already. Not a bad review yet. So give him a call, even if you're just curious about it. But he will be rocking with us all year long. We're going to put him on some recruiting pod twos because if you're a Bengal Tiger member, and then you know that the running joke is that at times he's been hit with the My Perfect Franchise predictions for a player that ends up going elsewhere. Not recently. High hit rate for his commitments.
Yes, sir.
In LSU's number 3 class. So maybe he'll start the season off here right with a dub for LSU against USC. But thank you to Andy. Thank you to everyone who supported him. And like I said, give him a shout. Myperfectfranchise.net. Okay, Matty B, we're not going to go longer than the mailbag, which I absolutely lied about, and we went for like 4 hours on when I said it would be an hour.
Well, let's jump to it. Let's go. Game ball predictions.
Game ball predictions. We did offense and defense last year. Let's do it again. You want me to go first?
No, I'll go first on offense.
Oh, look, there you go. Take the reins, Matty B. I love it.
Take the reins. Because I'm just gonna grab. Look, they're gonna run the ball. They're gonna.
This is fantasy draft style. Matty B is going pick 1 and 2 here. He's taking the most obvious safe plays.
I don't think I am. Well, maybe. Okay. They're going to run the ball. They're going to have success running the ball. I think they're going to be fine.
Who is LSU?
LSU will.
Okay.
I think will be fine running the ball. I'm not sure how explosive it'll be, whatnot, but that's not my concern. I think Garrett Nussmeier has to come out and have a game similar to Noah Fifita last year against UCLA. I think he has to have a game similar to what he had against Wisconsin, and I think he lives up to that. I think he passes for 300-plus yards and just throw a touchdown number out there. 3 touchdowns, no picks. Garrett Nussmeier, player of the game. I think he's going to be really good.
No picks. Let's go. That would be a win for me. I think that if he throws no picks, LSU's winning this football game.
Yeah.
He threw a pick in the bowl game, but he also threw for 400 yards in that game. He threw 3 touchdowns. And the pick was, we've talked about it, he rolled out on a play. And I think Brian Thomas was so used to when Jaden Daniels rolled out, it was, okay, I need to go block now. And he turned around to block. Nuss was throwing it, and Brian Thomas had no idea. It gets picked. And immediately you saw Nuss kind of do the, damn it, I knew that was going to happen. He was thinking I was running. I was really throwing it to him. He's had enough time this offseason to get that down. The more people I talk to around this program, the more people tell me the key to this season, the key to the game, whatever it might be, the key to Nussmeier is the balance of gunslinger and turnovers. If you've minimized turnovers and allowed him to still be a gunslinger that's played also within the offense, he can surprise a lot of people, or maybe live up to the expectations LSU fans have for him of being one of the, top half quarterbacks in the SEC, which he's not getting that love right now because so many SEC quarterbacks, and now you bring in Jackson Arnold and Quinn Ewers from Texas and OU. All these guys have played. Carson Beck's played. He's projected as a number 1 pick, basically. You go to each school, Graham Mertz at Florida, all these guys have played. only a handful of schools are working in new quarterbacks, but Nuss has got a lot of experience and he's played in some big moments. So it's a little bit different. I'm in the camp that thinks that the Nuss bus will be rolling this season. But on offense in this game, I'm going safe play. I think Mason Taylor can bail them out of some situations, can pick them up some first downs, can maybe pick up some 10 to 15-yard plays where you make a guy miss and you've got it. He's such a safe option for me, and I don't mean that in any negative way. Like, no, he's not going to score an 80-yard touchdown for you, but he can stack up 6 catches, 7 catches for 80 yards in a hurry. We saw it in the bowl game. So I think a key to Nuss, and I'll just make it the tight end room as well, a key to Nuss in this game is protecting the football. Well, guys like Mason Taylor, your tight ends, they can be that safety kind of option for you, the safety valve, however you want to say it. So offense, I'm going to go Mason Taylor. Now, obviously, his production comes with Garrett Nussmeyer's, but I'll build off you. You go Nuss, I'll go Mason Taylor. I think this is a Mason Taylor game.
All right. Defense. Do you want to go first for defense or let me go?
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
I predicted Harold Perkins will have 10 sacks on the season, so that means he needs to average in a 12-game season 0.8 a game.
Yep.
I think he gets 1.5 sacks this game. So
okay.
I'll go. I think that Perkins quotes about Baker, and I can read them off to you here. Let's see exactly what he said. He said that the rules that Coach House had in his defense and Coach Baker had, they're the opposite. All the stuff Coach House was telling us to do, Baker's telling us the opposite. Well, LSU fans, they probably don't even need to hear any more than that. They're happy with that. But then he went on to say, and I can paraphrase or just find it. He said, I'll quote him, there's so many different things we can do under Baker's defense. He said, Coach Baker has a spectacular mind, and he's come in right now and drawn up something that'll have me like, okay, I'm liking this. He's always bringing something fresh to the table, and the offenses are not going to be able to know what we're coming out and doing, almost hinting, not so subtly, that offenses knew last year what LSU was doing on defense. Harold Perkins feels that won't be the case this year. And I think moving him around and what he does at linebacker is key to that. So give me Harold Perkins, huge game out of the gate wearing number 7.
Yeah, I think that's the right pick here. I'm gonna go with something I said last podcast, which because I don't feel, I mean, you could go Swinson, maybe Jones or something like that. I'm gonna stick with Major Burns. I think Major Burns is gonna have a strong game here. I'm gonna stick with what I said earlier. I think he's gonna blitz. I think he maybe ends up with a sack, maybe ends up with a PBU, maybe a TFL, shoot the run game a little bit. I think they need him to have a really strong game. Where I will see how they, defend maybe a Zachariah Branch. I don't know how much Major will be on him per se. And if they do have to cover him with a nickel, then I would assume that they would put somebody else in, maybe a PJ Woodland or maybe even if it's Toviano or something like that, maybe a more coverage guy. But still, I think Major makes a couple plays here in this new position that maybe highlight him a little bit more. So give me Major.
I like it. Shout out Major Burns in this star position now. And look, I think if we see Jordan Allen playing, like that's going to be one spot we watch because he's the one guy out there who has not played a lot of starting football or even extended reps. And right now we have him projected as a starter alongside Jordan Gilbert at safety because Major Burns is playing the star, because Sage Ryan is playing corner, trying to kind of bide time for you to Zy Alexander help get PJ Woodland, his feet wet as a true freshman, before you start to rely on him a bit more, before you throw J.K. Johnson in as a backup. So Jordan Allen will be one I'm also watching in this game. And I say it every time. Nobody was a bigger Jordan Allen fan coming out of high school than Matty B. Loved his stuff at LCA. So we'll get a shot to see him this weekend. But we'll go Harold Perkins, you go Major Burns. Matty B, I'm confident in saying this. If Harold Perkins and Major Burns are two of the best players in this game, LSU's winning the football game.
I think so.
Because that's your best player on defense, and that's your veteran that everybody's like, how is he going to look? Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think
I almost think that those two players, if they play well, are the key to the game.
Yeah, I could see that. I think that's going to be, there's a lot of different question marks about this defense that we're going to have to see and we're going to learn about. So I'm just ready for it to get here. I'm ready to watch it instead of talking about it for once. So
Well, we
yeah.
don't more.
Wait, I
LSU.
lost you. Okay, I
Go
lost you
ahead.
for a second. Go ahead.
Okay. We don't have to talk about it for a moment more. Let's get our predictions in. This opened in a half. I don't have to talk much longer because we're down to the last thing. Score predictions here, Matty B. The game opened LSU minus 6.5. It's down to 4.5 and over under at 64.5. But one thing I think that jumped out at me when I was just kind of looking around at kind of some of the betting action and total points and all that, the scoring, if you were wanting to bet it, the two best odds, or I guess the two lowest odds out there, are LSU winning by 1-6 and LSU winning by 7-12. USC then checks in at 1-6 as the third best odds that they're, any team's catching. And then LSU winning by 13-18 is getting better odds than USC winning by 7-12. So yes, betting odds aren't everything, but the expectation, LSU is the favorite here. LSU, whether it's winning by field goal or a touchdown, is considered is getting better odds than USC winning at all by 1 to 3 points. Now let's go first. How's final score prediction here?
38-35 LSU.
Ooh, that's a high scoring game.
Yeah.
So you're saying smash the over.
The over's at 64 right now, something like
Yeah.
that. And I have it at 73. Or what I have? 38-35. Yeah, 73. So yeah, about a touchdown, I'd say. Maybe it gets in the low 30s. Maybe it stays in the low 30s. Maybe these quarterbacks aren't as sharp as I expect, but I've seen nothing or saw nothing in either Bowles' appearance or really from each offensive coach to expect anything other than the offense is being really sharp to start the year. I think talent's there. I think everything's there. I think the both defenses have enough question marks and enough uncertainty. And it is, even though I trust both defensive coordinators to be good, it's still the first game with the new defensive coordinator. So it's going to have some hiccups. It's going to have some ups and downs. I think USC scores, but I think LSU's offense, I trust a bit more here. I think LSU wins it by 3 or 4 points. I think the spread is pretty sharp at 4, in my opinion. So I will not be playing a side here either way, but I think LSU by 3 right now. Maybe I change it by the time we pick tomorrow or Saturday morning or whatever it is, but but LSU by 3 or 4 is where I'm staying. I just, maybe that changes by a number or two in the total.
I'm going under. I'm going 31-27. I think both these teams kick some field goals. I think that maybe the key for LSU would be forcing USC into a couple of field goals. LSU's been pretty good when they get down in the red zone to convert, and they've got a good kicker in Ramos who can make some kicks. He's experienced now. I think he does come in and hit one. I think LSU wins this from 31-27. And I don't know if that means coming back and from behind or kind of being ahead and holding that 7 to 4 point lead and keeping USC at bay and getting some stops late. But I think just with how they'll want to protect the football, run the football, and we'll see what USC does, new clock rules, I'm going with the under. I'll go third. In just week one, you're not crisp. Sometimes, yeah, you can miss tackles and do all that, may not crisp on defense. Well, offenses might not be crisp and in rhythm yet. So I'm going under. I think 31-27.
Cool. Fair. I like it.
LSU wins.
LSU
for
wins.
the first time in an opener in 5 years.
Long time. It would be nice. It would be nice to get so that way people don't have the pitchforks out early. So, but yeah, that's all we got for y'all today. Hope y'all enjoyed the podcast. Leave us a like, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't already. Subscribe to the Bengal Tiger on 3 if you are not already. 50% off for the year. What's the code again? Kickoff 24.
Yep, and it ends on Friday, so jump on it.
There you go. Got a full day.
I usually do the deuces every time we leave or get on the show, but I forgot that's the USC sign, so I probably shouldn't.
Yeah, don't
That's
do that.
the
Drop the
Hail
L's.
Victor's sign or whatever,
Drop the L's. There you go.
or is it reversed? I'm not Brian
Well,
Kelly. I'm not good at it.
on the camera, you have to do it backwards for us. So, anyways, there you go. Thank y'all for joining us. We'll be back after the game for our reaction.
Yeah. Yes. Check that. Every game we will be on right after on YouTube after Brian Kelly's presser. So like 30 minutes after the game, we'll be on YouTube talking about the game, whether it's live or loading it in. It'll be there for you every night after the game, and people eat that up. So we will come back to talk about everything we were wrong about or right about.
Which I'm sure there will be plenty, but
everything.
We'll see how it goes. Week 1 football, it's here. Enjoy it, and we will talk to y'all later.